The city hummed with a restless energy, a perpetual symphony of yellow cabs, distant sirens, and the muffled chatter spilling from countless storefronts. Amidst this vibrant, often unforgiving urban sprawl, nestled between a bustling dry cleaner and a perpetually aromatic flower shop, stood the Daily Grind. Its faded awning, once a cheerful burnt orange, now sagged slightly, a silent testament to years of battling the elements and, more recently, dwindling foot traffic. Inside, the air usually smelled of rich, roasted beans and warm pastries, but lately, a subtle undercurrent of anxiety had begun to seep into the aroma, a quiet desperation clinging to the chipped paint and worn wooden tables. Locals, once loyal patrons, were slowly drifting towards newer, shinier establishments, leaving the Daily Grind to fight for its very existence in a city that rarely paused for sentimentality. It was a place teetering on the edge, unknowingly awaiting an intervention from the most unexpected of sources. Enter Mr. Harrison. His name alone conjured images of gleaming skyscrapers, power lunches, and quarterly reports that made fortunes. He was a titan of industry, a man whose Midas touch had transformed struggling enterprises into glittering empires. Yet, despite his exorbitant wealth and undeniable success, a deep-seated disconnect gnawed at him. Boardrooms felt sterile, numbers abstract, and the accolades hollow. He'd built an impenetrable fortress of success around himself, only to find himself isolated within its walls, yearning for something real, something tangible. His latest acquisition, a chain of quaint coffee shops including the Daily Grind, felt like just another line item on a spreadsheet, another asset to be optimized. But a fleeting conversation, an overheard comment about losing touch, had sparked a peculiar notion, an audacious plan to bridge the chasm between his gilded cage and the raw, unfiltered reality of his business. He would go undercover, not for espionage, but for enlightenment. He would become a ghost in his own machine, a regular customer amongst his employees, observing, listening, truly understanding for the first time without the distorting lens of his executive persona. The Daily Grind, with its precarious position, presented the perfect crucible for his clandestine experiment. Behind the counter of this struggling cafe was Sarah, a whirlwind of motion and quiet determination. Her hands, nimble and swift, danced across the espresso machine, pulling shots with an practiced grace that belied her youthful appearance. Sarah was the kind of person who found beauty in the mundane, a ray of morning sunshine catching dust motes in the air, the rhythmic hiss of steaming milk, the brief, genuine smile of a grateful customer. Coffee wasn't just a job for her. It was a craft, a small act of kindness she poured into every carefully prepared cup. Her optimism, however, was a fragile shield against a relentless tide of personal struggles. Her younger brother, afflicted with a chronic illness, required constant medical attention, siphoning away most of her meager earnings. Every tip, every extra shift, was meticulously earmarked for his care, pushing her own dreams of attending culinary school further and further out of reach. She dreamed of creating innovative pastries, of infusing her passion for food into a business of her own. But for now, the reality of medical bills anchored her firmly to the clattering machinery of the Daily Grind. She often worked double shifts, her feet aching, her mind weary, yet she greeted each customer with a genuine warmth that was increasingly rare in the city. Her bright, hopeful eyes, however, sometimes held a flicker of deep worry, swiftly masked by another cheerful, "What can I get for you today?" Mr. Harrison's motivation was born from this gnawing emptiness. He craved an unfiltered view, a perspective untainted by sycophantic reports or curated presentations. He wanted to feel the pulse of his business, to understand the subtle nuances of customer experience and employee morale that cold data points simply couldn't capture. He needed to know what truly inspired dedication, what fostered loyalty, what made people show up day after day, not just for a paycheck, but because they believed in something. He suspected the answers lay not in quarterly profits, but in the everyday interactions, the small triumphs and silent struggles of people like Sarah. He understood that his disguised presence would offer him a unique opportunity to witness the unfiltered dynamics of his recently acquired establishment. He wanted to observe the unvarnished truth, the raw, authentic interactions that define the soul of the business, interactions that his executive title had always prevented him from truly experiencing. Meanwhile, Sarah battled a different kind of war each day. The daily grind, literally, was beginning to wear her down. The coffee machine often sputtered, demanding extra patience and gentle persuasion. The pastry oven, temperamental at best, sometimes overcooked one batch while undercooking the next. Customer complaints about slow service or rising prices were becoming more frequent, stinging her deeply despite her efforts to maintain a cheerful facade. She saw the cafe's dwindling sales reflected in the increasingly anxious glances of her few colleagues, the hushed conversations about potential layoffs, and the general manager's strained attempts at false optimism. The morale was sinking, thick and heavy like cold brew concentrate, threatening to pull them all under. Yet Sarah, with her quiet resilience, refused to give up. She wiped down counters with extra vigor, rearranged the display case with an artist's touch, and always offered an extra dollop of whipped cream or a free cookie to a sad-looking child. She truly believed in the potential of the daily grind, saw it as more than just a place to buy coffee, but as a small community hub, a haven in the concrete jungle. She believed that with a little more effort, a little more love, they could turn things around. But what difference could one barista girl make against the colossal forces of market trends and corporate decisions? She had no way of knowing that her quiet struggles, her unspoken hopes, were about to intersect with the covert mission of a powerful man who held her future, and that of the daily grind, in his surprisingly unassuming hands. If you enjoy stories of unexpected twists and human connection, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more captivating narratives that reveal the hidden depths of everyday life. You won't want to miss what happens next. The transformation was meticulous, a deliberate shedding of the executive persona, piece by carefully chosen piece. Mr. Harrison understood that true anonymity wasn't just about changing clothes. It was about altering the aura, the subtle signals of wealth and power that clung to him like an expensive cologne. He started with the attire, exchanging his custom-tailored suits for well-worn denim jeans, a faded flannel shirt, and a slightly stained baseball cap pulled low over his brow. His polished leather loafers were replaced by scuffed work boots, giving him a grounded, almost heavy-footed gait. Next came the slight alteration to his speech. The crisp, authoritative tone he used in boardrooms was softened, peppered with more common colloquialisms, the sentences shorter and less complex. He practiced a slight slump in his shoulders, a deliberate effort to diminish his imposing height, and let a 5 o'clock shadow grow, adding a touch of ruggedness to his usually clean-shaven face. His new backstory was simple yet effective. A retired long-haul truck driver named Frank, looking for a quiet place to read his newspaper and enjoy a good cup of coffee. This persona was carefully crafted to be unremarkable, easily forgettable, the kind of person you'd see every day without a second glance. The final touch was a pair of cheap, wire-rimmed reading glasses perched on his nose, lending an air of studious solitude. His first day at the daily grind under this new guise was a revelation. He chose a corner booth, strategically positioned to observe the entire coffee shop without drawing attention to himself. From behind the broad pages of a day-old newspaper, he watched Sarah. She moved with a practiced efficiency that belied the exhaustion etched faintly around her eyes. Her smile, though, remained genuine, a bright spot in the otherwise dimly lit café. She knew most regulars by name, their orders often prepared before they even reached the counter. There was a particular warmth in her interactions, a way she'd lean in slightly, truly listening when a customer shared a small anecdote, making them feel heard and valued. He noticed the small, quiet efforts she made to keep the place inviting. When a spill happened near the sugar station, she was there instantly with a cloth, not waiting for a manager. She straightened the stack of newspapers, wiped down tables even when they weren't explicitly her responsibility, and rearranged the pastry display to look more appealing. These weren't grand gestures. They were the countless, almost invisible acts of care that kept the café from completely succumbing to its neglect. Mr. Harrison, used to analyzing quarterly reports and profit margins, found himself observing something far more nuanced: the true cost of human dedication. Sarah's daily struggles, though unspoken, were visibly present in subtle ways. During a brief lull, he saw her pull out her phone, her brow furrowed as she scrolled through what looked like a banking app. Her lips moved almost imperceptibly as she seemed to be calculating something, a quick, worried glance flickering across her face before she quickly tucked the phone away as the next customer approached. Later, during her short break, she stepped just outside the back door, hunched over the phone, her voice lowered, hushed, and urgent. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone, laced with a quiet desperation, spoke volumes. He imagined calls about medical bills, overdue rent, or perhaps a sibling's tuition. Yet, within moments of returning to the counter, that unwavering positive attitude snapped back into place, her smile just as bright, her greeting just as enthusiastic. It was a mask, he realized, worn with practiced grace, but a mask nonetheless. A growing internal conflict began to stir within Mr. Harrison. He had come to observe, to understand the raw, unfiltered truth of this business he now owned. What he was witnessing, however, extended far beyond operational inefficiencies or customer acquisition strategies. He was seeing the human cost of a struggling enterprise, the personal sacrifices made by individuals like Sarah who poured their hearts into a place that offered so little in return. The numbers he'd seen on spreadsheets suddenly seemed cold, clinical, devoid of the vibrant, resilient spirit he now observed daily. A pang of guilt, sharp and unfamiliar, pricked at him. He was here under false pretenses, watching this young woman shoulder burdens that were ultimately his responsibility as the owner. His deception, initially a pragmatic tool for unvarnished insight, now felt like a heavy cloak of shame. He was privy to her quiet anxieties, her unspoken financial strain, and her relentless optimism in the face of adversity, all while she remained completely unaware that the retired truck driver nursing a lukewarm coffee held her future, and the future of the daily grind, in his hand. The weight of his true identity pressed down on him, making the cheap coffee taste bitter, and the comfortable anonymity of his disguise suddenly feel like a burden. He had sought truth, and now the truth felt uncomfortably personal, demanding more than just analysis, demanding action. The steady hum of the espresso machine suddenly ceased, replaced by a harsh, grinding sound that sent a jolt through the usually bustling morning routine. Sarah rushed over, her heart sinking as she recognized the distinct death rattle of the main coffee grinder. Just yesterday, the walk-in freezer had begun emitting an ominous whir, threatening to give out at any moment. Now this. A line of customers formed quickly, murmuring impatiently, and Sarah felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. It wasn't just the broken equipment. A recent supplier mix-up meant they were perilously low on their most popular roast, and the manager, Mr. Henderson, seemed more preoccupied with his phone than with the rapidly escalating chaos. Mr. Harrison, nursing his lukewarm coffee at his usual corner table, observed the scene unfold. From his vantage point, shrouded in his carefully crafted disguise, he watched Sarah spring into action. She calmly apologized to the waiting customers, explaining the situation with a genuine smile that somehow diffused their frustration. While one of the younger baristas, a nervous college student named Alex, fumbled with a backup, much smaller grinder, Sarah was already on the phone, her voice a low, steady murmur as she tried to troubleshoot with a technician. She didn't just serve coffee. She managed crises, soothed disgruntled patrons, and maintained a fragile semblance of order in a place teetering on the edge. He also noticed the other employees. There was Alex, clearly overwhelmed, and Maria, a part-timer who simply shrugged and continued wiping down the counter with an almost theatrical slowness. Their reactions were a stark contrast to Sarah's unwavering resolve. Alex, despite his visible anxiety, at least showed effort, albeit clumsy. Maria, on the other hand, exuded an air of detached apathy, as if the cafe's struggles were a distant problem, not her own. Mr. Harrison felt a surge of frustration at their lack of initiative, but then his gaze returned to Sarah, who was now expertly scooping grounds into the temperamental backup grinder, her brow furrowed in concentration. She moved with a purpose, a quiet determination that stood out starkly against the backdrop of growing disarray. Later that afternoon, a significant drop in daily revenue hit the staff like a cold wave. Mr. Henderson, finally emerging from his office, delivered the news with a grimace, suggesting they'd have to cut shifts. Despair began to settle over the few remaining employees, but Sarah, after a moment of quiet contemplation, refused to let it fester. She gathered the small team, her voice low but firm. "Look," she began, "it's tough, I know, but we can't just stand by." She then proposed an idea, one that had been brewing in her mind for weeks. "What if," she suggested, "we start a locals loyalty program, hand out punch cards, offer a free coffee after 10 purchases, and for a real push, what if we approach the new art gallery down the street? We could display their local artists' work here for a week, offer a discount to their visitors. It brings in new faces, gives us character." Mr. Harrison, overhearing her pitch, felt a flicker of admiration. It was simple, grassroots, and showed an understanding of community networking that was far more sophisticated than anything Mr. Henderson had ever proposed. But the general manager merely waved a dismissive hand. "Sarah, we don't have the budget for loyalty cards right now, and frankly, I don't see how turning our walls into an art exhibit is going to fix a broken grinder or supplier issues." His tone was laced with thinly veiled sarcasm, effectively squashing her enthusiasm. Mr. Harrison watched Sarah's shoulders slump, a visible dip in her usually buoyant spirit. It was clear that her passion was often met with apathy or outright dismissal, yet she persisted. He decided then and there that he couldn't remain a completely passive observer. Without revealing his identity, there were subtle ways he could help. The next morning, he left a crisp $100 bill tucked under his empty coffee cup, clearly marked for the tip jar, ensuring Sarah, who largely relied on tips, would feel a small, immediate boost. Later that week, noticing a loose panel on the service counter that Sarah frequently bumped into, he discreetly returned after closing hours. Using a small multi-tool he kept in his car, he tightened the screws, making sure it was secure, a small anonymous gesture to alleviate one minor daily frustration. He also began to subtly redirect conversations among customers, highlighting Sarah's exceptional service and the cafe's unique ambiance, hoping to generate positive word-of-mouth organically. He wasn't just observing anymore. He was a silent, strategic ally, laying the groundwork for something more, his disguise becoming less about anonymity and more about understanding the soul of the place he now discovered he deeply cared for. His presence was no longer merely investigative. It had become protective. Sarah, undeterred by the manager's dismissal, carried her locals loyalty program idea home, refusing to let it die. She spent her evenings sketching designs for punch cards, meticulously researching local artists on social media, even drafting a polite professional email to the new gallery owner herself. This wasn't just about saving the cafe. It was about proving that small, community-focused initiatives could make a real difference, that passion and connection mattered more than just bottom lines. She experimented with new coffee blends in her tiny apartment kitchen, meticulously weighing beans and grinding them to different consistencies, seeking that perfect, unique flavor profile that could become the cafe's signature. She envisioned a barista's special board, offering a rotating, handcrafted drink unique to their shop, something that would draw people in not just for coffee, but for an experience. Her enthusiasm, though privately nurtured, remained an infectious undercurrent in her interactions at work, a quiet defiance against the prevailing gloom. Mr. Harrison, now a regular fixture in his retired truck driver persona, watched her every move. He saw the late nights she pulled, the flicker of hope in her eyes as she shared a new recipe idea with a receptive regular, the way she carefully cultivated relationships with the handful of loyal customers who still frequented the cafe. His initial detached curiosity had transformed into a profound admiration. Sarah wasn't just an employee. She was the heart and soul of the place, a rare blend of resilience, creativity, and unwavering commitment. He realized he hadn't just acquired a struggling business. He had inadvertently inherited a community, and Sarah was its unwitting protector. He found himself not just observing, but actively rooting for her, a sensation entirely foreign to his typically clinical business analyses. The cafe, once just another asset on a spreadsheet, had begun to feel profoundly personal. Then came the blow that threatened to shatter everything. A glossy, modern chain coffee shop, Brew & Co., opened its doors just 2 blocks away, flaunting sleek designs, aggressive promotional offers, and a massive marketing budget. The few remaining regulars at their struggling cafe dwindled further, lured by the novelty and cheap initial discounts. Mr. Harrison watched the foot traffic shift, a palpable sense of dread settling over the neighborhood. As if that wasn't enough, a curt, official-looking letter arrived from the landlord. It wasn't an ultimatum yet, but a severe warning about overdue rent, hinting at impending eviction proceedings if significant payments weren't made within the month. The cafe's future, already precarious, now hung by the thinnest thread imaginable. One particularly slow afternoon, after a full hour without a single customer, Sarah finally crumbled. Mr. Harrison was nursing what had become his customary lukewarm black coffee in a secluded corner, pretending to read a worn newspaper. He watched as Sarah, thinking herself alone behind the counter, pulled out her phone. Her voice, usually so bright and full of life, was barely a whisper, thick with unshed tears. "Mom," she choked out, "I don't know what to do. It's getting so bad here." The new place. It's taking everyone. And the rent. I heard Mr. Henderson talking. He said if we don't make a big payment soon, they're going to shut us down. I tried everything, Mom. Everything. I just don't know where else to turn." Her words were punctuated by a raw sob, the kind that rips from deep within. Mr. Harrison's heart twisted in his chest. He had seen Sarah's struggle, her determination, her quiet strength. This was the first time he witnessed her despair, a raw, unfiltered vulnerability that pierced through his carefully constructed persona. He wanted to leap up, to reveal himself, to fix everything, but he knew he couldn't. Not yet. He had to play this carefully, strategically. But the image of her hunched figure, her shoulders shaking, would be seared into his memory. He realized then the true stakes were far higher than mere profit or loss. They were about livelihoods, about dreams, about the very essence of human spirit. And Sarah, the barista girl, embodied all of it. Her desperation was a stark mirror reflecting the cafe's imminent demise, a demise he was unknowingly responsible for. The gravity of his deception weighed heavily on him, a burden he could no longer ignore, threatening to crush both her spirit and his own carefully guarded anonymity. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that a corner had been turned. The future of this small cafe, and thus Sarah's own future, was rapidly approaching a critical juncture, and his role in it had to move beyond mere observation. He couldn't let her down. He wouldn't. The very air around her seemed to thicken with a palpable sense of impending loss, a silent plea that resonated deep within him. His presence was no longer merely investigative. It had become protective. He found himself increasingly invested, not just in the cafe's financial viability, but in the human stories unfolding within its worn walls. Sarah, in particular, had become a focal point of his quiet observations, her unwavering spirit a beacon in the dimming light of the cafe's fortunes. He often found himself lingering longer than necessary, nursing a lukewarm coffee, simply to watch her navigate the daily challenges with grace and an almost defiant optimism. He saw the tired lines around her eyes, etched there by worries far beyond the cafe's declining revenue, yet her smile for a customer never faltered. One particularly drab Tuesday afternoon, the air hung heavy with the scent of stale coffee and unspoken anxieties. The usual lunchtime rush was a trickle, and the silence in the cafe felt almost deafening. Mr. Harrison, ensconced in his usual corner booth, was attempting to read a newspaper, but found his attention constantly drifting back to Sarah. She was wiping down the counter, her movements slow and deliberate, a stark contrast to her usual energetic pace. Her phone, resting on a small shelf behind the counter, suddenly buzzed. She picked it up, her brow furrowing slightly as she swiped to answer. Her voice was hushed, almost a whisper, as if she didn't want to disturb the oppressive quiet. "Hey," she began, her tone tinged with an unfamiliar vulnerability. Mr. Harrison pretended to be engrossed in his paper, but his ears strained to catch her words. "No, it's okay. I needed a break." There was a pause, filled only by the distant hum of the refrigerators. "Yeah, I know. Things aren't great here, to be honest. The manager's talking about cutting hours again. I just don't know what I'm going to do." Her voice cracked slightly, a raw edge of desperation seeping through. Mr. Harrison's internal alarm bells began to clang. This wasn't the usual composed Sarah. This was a Sarah teetering on the precipice. She took a deep, shaky breath, then continued, her voice barely audible. "Mom, I love this place, you know? It's more than just a job. It's like, it's the only place I feel like myself sometimes. Another pause. Longer this time. No, I'm not being dramatic. I mean it. Everything else is so messy right now, with Dad and school loans and just everything. Her grip on the phone tightened, white-knuckled. Then, the words that hit Mr. Harrison like a physical blow, slicing through his carefully constructed anonymity, through layers of corporate detachment, and straight to his core. This place saves me. This place saves me. The three words hung in the air, echoing in the quiet cafe, resounding in Mr. Harrison's mind. He froze, his newspaper slipping from his grasp, rustling softly on the worn tabletop. The world seemed to tilt, and the carefully constructed facade of his disguise felt flimsy, almost transparent. He wasn't just hearing a barista talk about her job. He was hearing a soul lay bare its reliance on a sanctuary he owned, a sanctuary he had almost carelessly allowed to crumble. The profit margins, the market shares, the quarterly reports, all of it faded into an insignificant hum. What mattered was the palpable desperation in Sarah's voice, the genuine, unvarnished declaration of how much this small, struggling coffee shop meant to her. A montage of images flickered through his mind. Countless late nights spent alone in his sprawling, impersonal penthouse, the hollow echo of his own success, the gnawing sense of isolation. He remembered the small, local diner he'd frequented in his youth, a place run by a kindly old couple, where the scent of frying bacon and fresh coffee had always been a comforting balm against the anxieties of a young, ambitious man trying to make his way in the world. It wasn't just food. It was a community, a haven. That diner had been his place, a sanctuary where he could simply be, without the weight of expectations or the pressure to perform. He hadn't thought about it in years, but Sarah's simple, stark confession instantly pulled him back to that feeling, that profound connection to a physical space that transcended its commercial function. This cafe, this unassuming corner of the city, was Sarah's diner. It was her anchor in a tumultuous sea. The weight of his deception, which had previously felt like a clever strategic maneuver, suddenly became a crushing burden. He had been so focused on observing, on gathering unfiltered data, that he had overlooked the most vital data point of all. Human vulnerability, human need, human love for a place he owned. He had seen the cafe as an asset, a struggling number on a spreadsheet, an opportunity for acquisition and revitalization. Sarah saw it as her lifeline. He had held the power to save it, to save her all along, yet he had chosen to play a part, to watch from the sidelines. The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth. He had wanted to understand the real world, and now, undeniably, he did. He understood the stakes far better than any financial report could convey. The consequences of his inaction, of his continued masquerade, were no longer abstract figures on a balance sheet. They were etched in the trembling voice of a young woman who found solace and purpose within these very walls. His disguise, once a tool for insight, now felt like a barrier, a cruel joke. He had to do something. But the path forward, without betraying the trust he hadn't even realized he was building, felt impossibly complex. The three words echoed again, a haunting refrain. This place saves me. And in that moment, he realized it was beginning to save him too. The weight of Sarah's three words, this place saves me, pressed down on Mr. Harrison with an intensity he hadn't anticipated. It was a revelation, shattering his carefully constructed detachment, forcing him to confront the human cost of his corporate decisions. His immediate reaction was a jolt, a sudden, urgent need to act, but the how remained shrouded in the complexity of his deception. He couldn't simply rip off his disguise and declare himself the owner. Such a move would be chaotic, risking trust, and potentially doing more harm than good to the delicate ecosystem of the cafe and its employees. His mind raced, processing strategies, searching for a path that balanced urgency with discretion, impact with preservation. He felt an internal tremor, a profound shift in his understanding of what constituted success beyond mere financial metrics. This wasn't just a struggling asset, it was a sanctuary, a lifeline. Meanwhile, Sarah, despite the glimmer of hope spurred by Mr. Harrison's subtle interventions, the mysteriously fuller tip jar, the suddenly secure counter panel, the surprising influx of customers mentioning her by name, felt herself nearing a genuine breaking point. The relentless pressure from Mr. Henderson, the dwindling customer base, and the ever-present financial anxieties of her family life were taking their toll. One afternoon, after another particularly slow lunch rush and a disheartening conversation where Mr. Henderson casually mentioned exploring all options for the cafe's future, Sarah stood behind the counter, staring blankly at the espresso machine. Her usual effervescent energy had drained away, leaving a hollow ache. She felt her efforts were futile, a Sisyphean task of pushing a boulder uphill only to have it roll back down. A tear traced a path down her cheek as she thought of her sick mother, the mounting medical bills, and the dreams of college that seemed to recede further with each passing day. The cafe, her sanctuary, was itself under siege, and she, its most devoted soldier, was running out of fight. She gripped the cold metal of the counter, debating whether to just walk out, to spare herself the inevitable pain of watching her beloved workplace crumble. The thought was a bitter poison, but it offered a perverse kind of peace. Unseen, Mr. Harrison observed her distress from a quiet corner booth, his heart seizing at the sight. He recognized the look of utter defeat, a shadow that had, at times, haunted his own past. This was more than just an employee having a bad day. This was the spirit of "this place saves me" beginning to flicker. He knew then that his intervention needed to be more direct, yet still anonymous. He couldn't let that light die. That evening, he made several discreet phone calls. The next morning, a brand-new, top-of-the-line espresso machine arrived at the cafe, unexpected and fully paid for. The delivery driver simply stated, "It's a gift from an anonymous benefactor who believes in this place." Mr. Henderson, flustered and confused, tried to refuse it, but the machine was already being uncrated. The sheer expense, the sheer thoughtfulness, was a beacon of impossible hope. Sarah, watching the old, sputtering machine wheeled out and the gleaming new one carefully positioned, felt a rush of emotion overwhelm her. Tears, this time of profound relief, stung her eyes. It was as if the universe, or some benevolent force, had heard her silent cries. The new machine hummed with power, brewing coffee with a speed and consistency the cafe hadn't seen in years. The immediate impact was palpable: faster service, higher quality, and a noticeable uptick in customer satisfaction. But Mr. Harrison didn't stop there. He also anonymously arranged for a renowned local food blogger, known for discovering hidden gems, to visit the cafe. The blogger, a discerning woman with an enormous online following, arrived unannounced, ordered a complex latte, and watched Sarah meticulously craft it. Her subsequent glowing review, posted that very afternoon, was a sensation. It praised Sarah's incredible artistry, her warm demeanor, and the cafe's unexpected charm, describing it as a true heartland coffee experience that deserves to thrive. The post went viral, sharing across social media platforms like wildfire. Suddenly, Lines started forming outside the cafe, a phenomenon that hadn't been witnessed in months. Old customers returned, drawn by the buzz, and a wave of new faces, phones in hand, eager to try the viral latte, flooded in. The influx of business was immediate and overwhelming, but joyous. Sarah, though exhausted, moved with a renewed, almost frantic energy. She trained the other staff, managed the queues with grace, and poured her heart into every single drink. The clang of the register filled the previously quiet space, a symphony of success. Tips soared, morale skyrocketed, and Mr. Henderson, for once, seemed genuinely stunned into silence, his usual complaints replaced by bewildered smiles. These small, unexpected positives, orchestrated by Mr. Harrison's unseen hand, had given Sarah more than just a momentary boost. They had ignited a powerful, blazing fire of renewed hope within her. She redoubled her efforts, her belief in the cafe, and more importantly, in herself, stronger than ever. She knew, deep down, that she wouldn't just watch this place save her. She would fight tooth and nail to save it back. Mr. Harrison, observing the transformed atmosphere, the sparkle back in Sarah's eyes, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The seeds of his true plan were starting to sprout. He knew the general manager's impending announcement loomed, but now Sarah had the strength, the belief, and perhaps just enough momentum to face it head-on. The hum of the new espresso machine, once a sound of triumph, now felt like a cruel counterpoint to the hushed, grim atmosphere that settled over the cafe. Despite the recent surge in customers, the smiles, and the renewed hope, an ominous cloud had gathered. Mr. Henderson, usually a blustering figure, entered the cafe that Tuesday morning with a stoop to his shoulders, his face a mask of defeat that even his ill-fitting suit couldn't hide. He called for an all-staff meeting, a rare occurrence that usually signified something important or something terribly wrong. Sarah, wiping down the gleaming counter, felt a prickle of unease. The other baristas exchanged nervous glances, their usual banter silenced. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, his voice unusually soft, almost a whisper against the background murmur of the still busy cafe. "Listen up, everyone," he began, his gaze sweeping over their expectant faces. "I'm afraid I have some very difficult news." A collective intake of breath filled the space. Sarah's heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She braced herself, instinctively knowing that whatever was coming, it wouldn't be good. "The company, the headquarters, they've made a decision," he continued, fumbling with a crumpled tissue in his hand. Despite the recent turnaround, they've decided that this location isn't financially viable in the long term. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. They're closing us down. End of the month. Or, potentially, selling the lease to a new, larger chain. The announcement landed like a physical blow. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face, her hands gripping the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles turned white. Closing? After all this? After the new machine, the blog review, the lines out the door? It made no sense. The other baristas reacted with a cacophony of disbelief, anger, and despair. But we're doing so well now," one exclaimed, his voice cracking. "We've never been busier," another pleaded. Mr. Henderson merely shook his head, looking more crestfallen than angry. "It's a corporate decision, folks, made weeks ago, before any of this. They're streamlining portfolios. They say it's too small, too independent for their new vision." His words were a death knell, echoing through the revitalized space. Sarah stood frozen, her mind reeling. All her efforts, all her renewed hope, extinguished in a single cold corporate decree. She felt a profound, aching emptiness spread through her chest. The place that had saved her was now being taken away, an invisible hand crushing not just a business, but her very sanctuary. Mr. Harrison, sitting discreetly at his usual corner table, observed the scene unfold. He watched Sarah, her vibrant energy replaced by a stark, pale shock. He saw the fire dimming in her eyes, the devastation etched on her face. The general manager's words were brutal, impersonal, and utterly deaf to the human cost. This was the moment, the exact scenario he had anticipated, the one that necessitated his drastic intervention. He could no longer simply watch. The charade had run its course. The time for subtle nudges and anonymous gifts was over. He felt a surge of resolve, a quiet determination hardening in his gaze. His disguise, once a tool for observation, now felt like a heavy burden, a barrier between him and the action he needed to take. He pushed his half-finished coffee aside, the bitter taste a reflection of the sentiment in the room. His mind began to race, formulating a plan for his dramatic reveal. He needed to be swift, decisive, and impactful. He rose from his seat, his slightly stooped posture straightening imperceptibly, a glimmer of his true authoritative bearing beginning to show. He reached into his worn jacket, pulling out a small, sleek device, his personal communicator, an object far too sophisticated for a retired truck driver. He quickly tapped out a message to his executive assistant, a woman who understood the meaning of urgency. The cafe was in chaos, the collective grief palpable. Sarah, leaning against the counter, looked utterly lost. As Mr. Henderson tried in vain to answer questions he clearly had no answers for, a sudden booming voice cut through the despair. "Excuse me, everyone. If I may have your attention, please." Mr. Harrison's voice, no longer disguised in a gruff murmur, resonated with an unexpected power, filling the room. All eyes, wide with surprise, turned to him. Sarah, slowly lifting her head, stared. Who was this old man? And why was he interrupting their collective misery? He walked purposefully towards the counter, his gait now firm and confident. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet, but not the worn leather one he usually carried for his disguise. This was a sleek, black leather piece, and from it he swiftly produced a card. He held it up, not for everyone to see, but specifically towards Mr. Henderson, who squinted, then gasped. The general manager's face went from pale to ashen, his jaw dropping slack. He knew that card. He knew the name on it. "Mr. Henderson," Mr. Harrison said, his voice now imbued with an undeniable authority that made everyone stand a little straighter. "I believe there has been a grave misunderstanding." He turned his gaze, which now held an intense, unwavering focus, towards Sarah. Her eyes, still brimming with unshed tears, met his. There was a flicker of confusion, then recognition, as something in his posture, the sudden intensity, began to click. "My name," he announced, his voice ringing clear and strong, "is Thomas Harrison." The name itself carried weight, an echo of power and influence. Sarah had heard it before, had seen it on corporate emails, though she'd never connected it to the quiet, observant regular. "And as of approximately 6 months ago, I am the owner of this coffee shop. I am, in fact, the owner of the entire parent company that you all believe is streamlining portfolios." The silence that followed was absolute, deafening. It was a silence born of shock, disbelief, and a dawning, overwhelming awe. Sarah felt a peculiar mix of all three. The man who had been her regular customer, the quiet observer, the one who occasionally offered a kind word or a generous tip, was her boss. Not just her boss, but the boss. Her mind struggled to process the seismic shift in reality. The billionaire disguised as a simple man, right here, all this time. Confusion warred with a burgeoning sense of betrayal. Then a flicker of desperate, impossible hope. Mr. Henderson, now stammering, looked utterly annihilated. His corporate arrogance evaporated into thin air. The other employees stared, their mouths agape, their initial despair momentarily forgotten, replaced by this incredible, unbelievable revelation. The air crackled with unspoken questions, with the sudden, shocking weight of a secret unveiled. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. Mr. Henderson, his face grim, cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the suddenly silent cafe. "As you all know," he began, his voice devoid of its usual bluster. "Despite recent, positive fluctuations, the company has been evaluating this location for some time. The decision has been made. This branch, regrettably, will be closing its doors permanently at the end of the month." A collective gasp rippled through the staff. Sarah felt her heart plummet, a cold despair washing over her, freezing the hope that had so recently sparked within her. All her efforts, all the late nights, the new machine, the viral review, it was all for nothing. The fight was over. She stared blankly, tears welling, as Mr. Henderson continued to drone on about corporate restructuring and unavoidable decisions. It was in that moment, as the last vestiges of her hope threatened to extinguish completely, that a voice cut through the oppressive silence, firm and resonant. "Excuse me, Mr. Henderson, but I believe there's been a slight misunderstanding." All heads turned, eyes widening in disbelief, to see the unassuming delivery driver, the very man who had been a quiet fixture for weeks, the one who'd subtly helped, the one Sarah had served countless times, step forward from the back of the room. He shed his faded baseball cap, revealing a starkly different, authoritative presence. His eyes, usually softened in his disguise, now held an undeniable glint of power. He reached into his jacket, not for a receipt, but for a meticulously folded document. "My name is Arthur Harrison," he announced, his voice carrying an unexpected weight, "and I am the owner of this cafe, and indeed, of the entire chain that owns this cafe." The words hung in the air, dense and impossible. Sarah's jaw dropped. The other employees stared, a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning awe on their faces. Mr. Henderson stammered, his face paling to an ashen white. "Mr. Harrison, but you were the delivery man. You were—" He trailed off, utterly speechless. Arthur Harrison offered a faint, almost regretful smile. "Indeed, Mr. Henderson. I needed to understand what truly happened within these walls, unfiltered by executive reports. And what I heard, what I saw, especially from one particular individual, has completely reshaped my perspective." He turned his gaze directly to Sarah, and her heart hammered against her ribs. "Sarah," he began, his voice softening slightly, "I overheard you speaking on the phone some weeks ago. You said 3 words that resonated with me more deeply than any financial spreadsheet ever could. You said, 'This place saves me.'" Sarah blinked, remembering that raw, vulnerable moment of despair. She felt a blush creep up her neck, embarrassment mixing with a bewildering sense of recognition. He had been there. He had heard her. "Those words," he continued, holding her gaze, "they reminded me that a business is not just about profit margins and market shares. It's about community, about purpose, about the lives it touches. You, Sarah, and this team have poured your hearts into this place, especially you. Your dedication, your innovation, Your sheer refusal to give up, even when everything pointed to failure, has been nothing short of inspiring. It's why this cafe, against all odds, began to flourish again. He then addressed the stunned employees. Therefore, Arthur Harrison declared, his voice firm with renewed conviction, I am here to announce that this cafe is not closing. On the contrary, we are going to invest significantly in its future. Sarah, he paused, a genuine warmth in his eyes. Your vision for this place, your proposed initiatives, your belief in its potential are exactly what this company needs. Effective immediately, I am promoting you to general manager of this cafe with a substantial stake in its success. I want you to rebuild it, to implement all those ideas you've been nurturing, and to turn it into the vibrant heart of this community that it deserves to be. A collective cheer erupted, initially tentative, then growing into a thunderous applause. Sarah, tears now streaming freely down her face, couldn't speak, only nod vigorously, a wide, incredulous smile blooming through her tears. The weight she had carried for so long, the burden of impending loss, lifted instantly, replaced by an overwhelming surge of gratitude and exhilaration. Under Sarah's passionate leadership and Arthur Harrison's unwavering support, the cafe did more than just survive. It thrived. Her innovative ideas, once dismissed, were now celebrated. New menu items, community events, and a renewed focus on local sourcing transformed the struggling establishment into a bustling hub of activity. The once empty seats were now consistently filled with laughter and lively chatter. Sarah, no longer just a barista, blossomed into a confident, inspiring leader, her personal struggles dissolving as her dreams took flight. The college fund grew exponentially, and her family found stability she could only have dreamt of. Arthur Harrison, too, found a profound new purpose. The cafe became a beacon, a personal reminder that true success wasn't measured in balance sheets, but in the human connection, in the impact one could have on individual lives. He continued his undercover visits, not as a test, but as a genuine pleasure, observing the thriving cafe, the vibrant community it built, and the remarkable woman who had taught a millionaire the true value of "this place saves me." The story of the disguised millionaire and the resilient barista spread far and wide, a testament to the power of empathy, vision, and 3 simple, heartfelt words. It was a happy ending, not just for a cafe, but for souls intertwined by fate and a shared belief in the magic of a good cup of coffee. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, share, and comment below. And don't forget to subscribe for more captivating tales that prove the extraordinary can be found in the most ordinary of places.